I am joined by one of my very favorite people, Dr. Dawson Church.
Oh, Marci, it's such a thrill to be here.
What's one thing we all could do in our life today that could help us open up just a little bit to this energy?
I'll give you one funny one. When you relax your tongue, it sends a mechanical signal throughout your body to relax. So this is a little exercise I'm going to have you do right now.
Tapping on various meridian points. Why does it work?
We see the limbic system, the brain's limbic system, get really active when people think about that childhood event. And you tap on these points, and now the body's getting a second signal saying, everything's fine.
So I want to start by having you share your own journey to living a more miraculous life.
One day I was really having a hard time. I said, I'm going to meditate every single day, no matter what. And Marci, within a few weeks,
You are not meant to struggle. You are meant to live in the miracle zone. Hi, I'm Marci Shimoff. I'm the #1 New York Times best-selling author and founder of Your Year of Miracles. And after decades of exploring the true source of happiness and success, I have found one thing, and that is when you align with the energy of miracles, life flows with joy and grace. So welcome to Living in the Miracle Zone. And today I am thrilled because I am joined by one of my very favorite people on the whole planet, Dr. Dawson Church. Hello, Dawson.
oh, Marci, it's such a thrill to be here. I know we're going to have a blast together.
We always do. I'm going to tell people about you from the bio, but I'm going to also then add in from my heart. So Dawson is a best-selling science writer. He's the author of 3 award-winning books. The Genie in Your Genes broke new ground by showing that gene expression is influenced by our emotions. He also wrote Mind to Matter. It's based on hundreds of studies showing that our brains play a key role in constructing the reality around us. And then in Bliss Brain, he demonstrates that as we cultivate peak states, our brains rewire themselves for happiness. And Dawson is the founder of the Veterans Stress Solution. He's offered free PTSD treatment to over 22,000 veterans. And I have to say, his newest book has just come out. And I think this is the best of them all. Spiritual Intelligence, Activating the 4 Circuits of the Awakened Brain. And I'm so excited that we get to talk about this today and about how this helps us live more in the miracle zone. But before we go into that, Dawson, I just want to share with everybody my own experience of you. And that is, Dawson is a towering presence in the planet. Dawson is, I don't know, 1.5 feet taller than I am. But beyond that, you are a towering presence in your being and in your heart. Whenever I am with you, I feel so uplifted. I feel, we catch the emotions of the people around us. We catch their consciousness. And I love being in your presence because I feel so uplifted. You are just a truly awake, extraordinary soul, and I love you.
Oh, Marci, it's mutual. Thank you. And what we find as we do live in the miracle zone is we find we attract people like that because our vibration is like that. So it's interesting what happens is that some of the people we used to find it easy to be with become less easy to be with. And then we find it natural to attract people who are at that vibrational level. So vibrate in the miracle zone and you'll find that miracles start to happen spontaneously all around you.
And they truly do. And I have to say, whenever we're together, miracles are everywhere. It's just beautiful. So I want to start by having you share with everybody your own journey to living a more miraculous life, because it wasn't always that way.
It's interesting that many people who are inspired and who go on to create extraordinary lives for themselves didn't begin that way. Some did, but so many didn't. And there's an interesting statistic drawn from post-traumatic growth research, and that is that of people who have traumatic experiences that should lead to PTSD, for 2/3 of people, it actually leads to post-traumatic growth. And so we can take that chaos and that being misunderstood and that abuse and those tragedies of our childhood and our adult lives. And that actually can become, research shows that for 2/3 of people, that does not produce PTSD, that produces post-traumatic growth. And so for me, I was one of those typical kids who was really, back then it was called poorly adjusted. Poorly adjusted to this plane of reality. And one day I remember I walked past a full-length mirror, and there weren't a lot of those around in the 1950s. And I remember stopping and looking at myself in the mirror and staring at this apparition. And at that time, I had long hair, like down to my waist, and I was like hippie guy. And the thought popped into my head as I looked at my face. Those are the saddest eyes I've ever seen. And that's me. And I realized I was so wrecked. So I went off and joined a spiritual community at 15, and I learned the great tradition, the great spiritual philosophy underlying all the world's great traditions. I learned to meditate, learned energy healing. I did not get a little bit happier. I got a little bit happier, but very marginally. So I turned to psychology and went to study psychology in university and learned a lot about that, especially Gestalt therapy. And then I eventually got to a place where I made the decision at 45 years old. One day I was really having a hard time. I said, I'm going to meditate every single day, no matter what. No excuses whatsoever. No excuses saying, I'm too tired, I'm too busy, all this stuff in our minds, why we don't do the things we know we should do for our personal good. And Marci, within a few weeks, my whole life had shifted. I discovered energy therapies. I discovered EFT tapping, energy psychology. And suddenly I got a lot healthier. I began to have much more mastery in parenting, relationships, money, all kinds of areas of my life. And meditation made the key difference. And I've used many other things since then. And that, though, was the big shift. I then got into research, began to do scientific studies, began to collaborate with people in other universities and institutes. And we then began to research these kinds of energy healing empirically. Now there are over 200 studies of EFT. There are over 300 studies of EMDR. These really obscure, what seem like really woo-woo techniques like tapping on acupressure points, moving your eyes around in your head. How can that help you heal from psychological problems? It does, big time. Energy heals matter. So that's become my trajectory in science. And I've written these best-selling science books to try and show people that there's such good science behind these. And now we're in Kaiser Permanente. We're in the Veterans Administration. We're in the National Health Service in the UK. We're in the German and the French systems of healthcare. And so we're just in the middle of this massive change socially in our ability to tackle these scourges like anxiety and depression and PTSD that have so wrecked human potential for so many generations before us. And that's where we find ourselves today. And that's what I write about now in my newest book, Spiritual Intelligence.
And so, I for people that aren't familiar with what you're talking about, EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. You run EFT Universe and tapping. It's also referred to as tapping. And I'm so grateful to you for the research that you've done on these various modalities that have allowed them to go mainstream, because I've been using them for years and years and years. And now I get to go, hey, look at the research, so you've done that kind of work. So I definitely want to talk about spiritual intelligence. Before we go into that, I'd love to understand from you why it is that something like tapping on various meridian points, why does it work?
That's a great question, Marci. Why does something as seemingly unrelated to healing as moving your eyes around or tapping on your skin have an effect on your mind, on your psychology, and your body? And it's really interesting the way this works. And one of the things we've done quite a bit is we've hooked people up to EEGs. And when you do this, you hook people up to an EEG, electrodes on their heads, and then you can see what's going on in their brains and how information is flowing in their brains. And when we work with a person who's traumatized, for example, in working with these veterans, I remember one young man who I worked with, and we were in a TV studio. They were filming us, and somebody walked into the studio. They had a plastic water bottle in their hands, and while we were filming, they crackled. Just absentmindedly did this, and this guy was ready to dive under the table. He was so triggered because it sounded like a small arms fire that he'd heard in Iraq. So if that guy had been hooked up to an EEG, we would have seen the emotional centers of his brain get highly active, highly triggered. And we all have those triggers. And maybe you weren't in Iraq, but you may have been in a family where people fought or yelled. It can be terrifying for a child to hear mommy or daddy or aunt or uncle or brother or sister doing that. I have one ultrasound of a fetus in the womb. This baby's maybe at 7 months or thereabouts of age. So it's got the amniotic fluid. You see the baby just like moving around in the womb. Then mom and dad start yelling at each other, and you see this fetus is just jumping around like the startle response, the panic reflex. And cortisol, our main stress hormone, crosses the placental barrier. So here, this kid is like you and me, probably learning the biochemistry of stress at a body level, cellular level, while the cells are forming, their brain is growing, and they're not even born yet. And so many of us have these levels of stress that are totally inappropriate to our relatively comfy lives nowadays. And so this young man had the startle response, and the EEGs can pick that up. We see the limbic system, the brain's limbic system, get really active when people think about that childhood event, when they think about the bad divorce, car crash, whatever it might be. What happens is that the memory that is being recalled is triggering the limbic brain, the memory and learning centers of the brain, and they're sending that signal to the amygdala and then to the cortex around the kidneys that produces cortisol, the adrenal cortex, and that then floods the body with these stress hormones like cortisol and norepinephrine. And so that's the stress response we all are so familiar with. And it shuts down the body, it shuts down digestion. You feel that knot in your stomach, you feel short of breath, your muscles get all tense, and that's what it looks like to be stressed. When you send a second signal to the body, so it's getting this one signal now saying, have a panic attack, get stressed, there's something threatening in the environment. So it's getting that signal and it's doing the appropriate thing. It's sending that signal down to the adrenal cortex, producing lots of cortisol. But now it gets a second signal from tapping on acupressure points. And these acupressure points are potent. We can measure them with electronic devices now. And you tap on these points, and now the body's getting a second signal. And that second signal is very soothing. It's very soothing to tap on these points. And now it's getting a signal saying, everything's fine. There's no real threat in the room. And that memory of being in that firefight in Iraq 10 years ago isn't a real threat to your survival in the here and now. And when the body gets that second signal, it's a physical signal, not a mental signal of safety, that cancels out the earlier signal of stress from the memory. And when you break the association in the neurons one time, it's absolutely astonishing. You go and talk to that person who is so stressed again 6 months or 12 months or 24 months later. We've done lots of clinical trials with long follow-up periods. They're no longer stressed. Once you break the association between the stimulus and the response one time using EMDR, using EFT, using an effective physical therapy, physical-based therapy, then it stays broken forever. So that's the way EFT works. We see people and their emotional brain on the EEG just calms way down. When we talk to them again a year later about the water bottle, or we in fact, in that case, we had someone walk into the studio with a water bottle and do it again, recreate that, and the guy was totally calm after about 30 minutes of tapping on acupressure points with him. We've done this now with tens of thousands of veterans, many people in all kinds of crisis situations. I'm training both psychotherapists and also school teachers in Ukraine right now. And there are just millions of people there who are so traumatized by the war, desperate need. And so we're getting it into the world's hotspots wherever we can, however quickly we can, to help people there deal with these crises. And we're helping people as well on an ordinary level in other countries too, through our network of practitioners. So it's available to
Well,
people, using it widely and reducing their stress.
and I call that miraculous. That really trauma that we haven't known how to heal in the past, that through tapping on these points actually can have remarkable results in healing in ways that so to me that's one of the great miracles these days. And so, I know what one of the things I truly love about you is that you're very, very practical. And your newest book, Spiritual Intelligence, which is, by the way, one of the most beautiful books I have ever seen. And I've seen a lot of books. And you told me privately that what was one of your goals is to make sure it was very, very beautiful and inspiring. And it truly is. And it's very practical also. And I want to understand, first of all, why did you write Spiritual Intelligence? And what is it that we can get out of understanding it?
Well, I love science, and my last conversation of the day yesterday was enthusing to my wife about a particular study done by the Mayo Clinic and the implications it has. And it showed that a belief that people in yoga have had for thousands of years was actually completely wrong, and also how to fix it. So there are all these things that science shows us. A lot of it is counterintuitive. So I love science for that reason, and that's why I have been involved myself personally with over 100 studies and scientific papers, and have a long publication history, and have done all of this research. So I absolutely love that part of experience in life, measuring stuff. Like if you tell me you're happy, I'll ask you, how happy? On a scale of 0 to 100. I want a number. And it's just a real interest of mine is to measure it. And then I'll say, okay, now you're you're 72. Let's do some tapping and let's see if we can raise that or what effect does it have. So science helps us measure things. But the other part of my life is I meditate. And I began meditating at 45. That was decades ago. I hardly ever missed a day since. And so when you meditate, especially when you meditate using science-based techniques, and I invented one called eco meditation to research and also to give people an evidence-based technique that was really rooted in science that works. And it just works whether you believe in meditation or not, whether you have failed other meditation methods or not. It's just empirical. It just works. We just know from many studies that these techniques work. So,
and I have done many, many meditations, and I can attest to the fact that ego meditation is a fabulous meditation, and it doesn't take that long. It's about 15 to 20 minutes, and it's just powerful, truly.
That's right. And it's powerful because it's science-based. And so I love science, but I'm meditating. And so what I found myself doing over the course of a few years was moving into higher and higher vibrational states in meditation. And you do it deliberately initially. You follow a method. You may have to do it fairly mechanistically. But after a while, once your higher self is really there, once you've invited your higher self into your life, most of us have such a backlog of energy and interest and love from our higher selves we haven't received because we haven't made time for it. And it's like any friend. If you make time for a friend, you cultivate the relationship. And I compare it to having a rich uncle. I say, if you had an uncle who was a billionaire and he lived 2 miles away from you and he was really old, about to die soon, you'd probably pay some attention to him. You'd go over and mow his lawn and bake him a cake and bring him a birthday card and sing happy birthday to him on his birthday. I mean, you'd cultivate the relationship if you had a billionaire uncle. And you have far more than that. You have a higher power there that is just full of absolute unconditional love for you. And most people aren't tuning in to all of the gifts of the universe. And so as you do meditate, then you're showing up and saying, I'm available. And when you do that, your higher power will dump so much love, so many blessings into your life, you won't be able to contain them all. So, after doing that for many, many years and entering these elevated states, I also was reading the other mystics, reading Ramana Maharshi, reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, reading about Anandamayi Ma and all these other teachers. And I eventually put this into a course called The Short Path to Oneness and began leading people through a set of steps. Because, again, being a researcher, I said, these are great teachings, but let's organize them into a curriculum where people can do them logically. So we do that with people. We have the short path to oneness. And I began to do all of these short path techniques. And I found myself entering states that there are no words to even describe in English. And that's why we hear so many words from Sanskrit on the spiritual journey. There are words like Vishoka. Vishoka is a level of ecstasy that we do not have a word for in English because most people who speak English never experience Vishoka. But the literal translation is sorrowless joy. Sorrowless joy. Imagine having access to sorrowless joy, Vishoka in Sanskrit. Joy and happiness, the words we use, are other words in Sanskrit, Preya, Sukha, and they designate joy and happiness. Far above that is Vishoka, and way above that still is Ananda. And I found myself entering those spaces. And so I've been wanting to explain these to people. And I began to focus on spiritual intelligence and this capacity we have to connect with something, initially our higher selves, and then through our higher selves, all the wisdom, love, and information in an unlimited cosmic consciousness. And I discovered to my amazement as I began to write the book about 5 years ago that it's highly mediated by our brains and that we have 4 specific circuits in every human brain. You have it, I have it, every human being has these 4 circuits. And these 4 circuits dance together in what researchers call the Enlightenment Network. And when you turn on the Enlightenment Network, you both have an ability to receive downloads from cosmic consciousness, and you have the ability to move upward in your vibration, your energy flows into those states of cosmic consciousness. It's a two-way street. And so you're receiving all of the love and information, and you're also allowing yourself to move in your consciousness and blend, become one in these non-dual states with that consciousness. And you have the hardware in your brain. It's literally hardware. And in chapter 2, I talk about how you actually grow that hardware, because monks and nuns and meditators, they're literally firing those circuits. And when you fire, you wire them. In one of the videos in the book, I have an image of firing and wiring. We see 2 neurons firing and getting close to each other. They wire, and the whole process takes 12 seconds. Every 12 seconds, you're wiring a new connection together. Do that for a month, and you have a whole bunch of new tissue in your brain. So it's not just mind, it's not just an abstract thing of ephemeral mind, it's hardware in your brain, and you can build it. And within 30 days, science shows of firing, you can build enough hardware to wire and start to experience these elevated states. So that's spiritual intelligence. It's strongly physical. Everyone has these circuits in their brains. They are suppressed by stress. When you are stressed, you dial down the activity of the Enlightenment Network. When you de-stress yourself through tapping, meditation, you then turn on the Enlightenment Network. You start to experience these states. So that's what spiritual intelligence is. That's how it's actually something we can all acquire and build. Chapter 3 is called the tipping point, because at a certain time, a certain moment, it could be 30 days in, it could be 5 months or 6 months in, could be a year in, you add the last neuron, like the last straw that broke the camel's back. You add that final neuron, and it's hysterical talking to people who do this. It's like I've been meditating, Dawson, every day now for 6 months, not feeling anything. Suddenly, 6 months in one day, bam! They're having ecstasy. They reach the tipping point, and there are millions of people in today's world who are reaching the tipping point, who are going from being seekers of ecstasy, seekers of enlightenment, to being finders. And this book explains how we can build those circuits, reach the tipping point, and then inhabit those elevated states as our everyday reality.
Well, thank you for writing this for all of us who have been seekers. You know, I was a seeker the get-go, and a meditator for many, many years. And I just got back from India, actually, and I was just visited. I have a little picture right next to me of Ananda Moya Ma, who you spoke of. There's a picture of Ananda Moya
Ah,
Ma.
ah,
And
ah.
Ananda means bliss. She was the considered the embodiment of bliss. And I actually experienced some very deep, significant breakthroughs by being in that space, by being in that energy. She's been gone since 1982 or something, but being in that energetic space. Now, most people don't have an opportunity or really a need to go to a place like a sacred site like that. And what you're showing in spiritual intelligence is how we can practically reach that tipping point in our own lives. So we are living in that state. You know, if one person, if Ananda Moyama can live in this embodied bliss state, we all can. And I think that this was reserved for those few in the olden days. It's time on the planet now for all of us. And that's what you're doing here with spiritual intelligence. So I know we don't have time to do a practice together here, but I would love to hear. You have a lot of practical exercises, I know, at the end of each chapter and all of that. Is there one thing you could share with us that we could leave here and do to help ignite more of our spiritual intelligence?
Easily. I just want to underscore the point you made that we used to look up and revere these saints like Ananda Maya Ma, and what we've now discovered, what science has now discovered, is that those circuits that were in her brain that led her into bliss are in your brain as well. They're dormant. You just have to turn them on. But literally, you have these networks in your brain. It's just a matter of learning how to turn them on. So at the end of each
Wait. Before you go any further, I just have to say that to me is such reason for celebration. You know, we thought this wasn't possible. We can't do that. What you're saying is they are there. We just have to know how to wake them up. Hallelujah, I say.
Yeah, and so at the end of each chapter of the book, I have what are called extended play resources and deepening practices. So if you go to the very last chapter, the very last page of each chapter, you'll see extended play resources, deepening practices. There'll be meditations, guided meditations there that you can follow. There are videos that you can look at. There are links to other resources that will make the experiences of this spiritual intelligence chapter real for you in your life and will develop your spiritual intelligence. So my goal with the book is to have people reading it is great because there are so many stories there of people who had spiritual intelligence and who really just transformed history. I mean, Pope John Paul II, when he was shot in St. Peter's Square in the early 1980s, I mean, this assassin pumped 6 bullets into his body. A year later, after he recovered, he was in the prison cell of that assassin, forgiving him and petitioning the president of Italy to let him go. I mean, there are examples of spiritual intelligence. So I've got, Brother Lawrence in there and St. Joan in there, modern day examples. The book begins with the story of Anthony Ray Hinton, who modern day man who was imprisoned for 30 years unjustly after a racially biased prosecutor put him behind bars. And he was kept in a solitary confinement cell most of those 30 years that was 5 feet by 7 feet and only allowed 1 hour of exercise a day. After a few years, his guards were petitioning the governor of Alabama to set him free. They said he could never have committed a crime. And eventually, the Supreme Court exonerated him. But even after 30 years of being unjustly imprisoned, he had nothing but forgiveness for his guards. So I have modern day examples like that and ancient examples of people with spiritual intelligence. And I want to awaken in you the passion for developing your own. This is a book not just have you read and gather information. It's a book to have you act on, activate those circuits of the Enlightenment Network, feel that ananda, that bliss, and then see that flooding your life. That's when you put yourself in the miracle zone, when you are doing those practices that move you into those higher vibrational states, and they then start to spread out and touch and affect your relationships and your food and your money and your physical health, all kinds of things shift seemingly miraculously. You just put yourself in another place by activating that Enlightenment Network. So it is accessible and available to all of us, as Marci's saying.
So what, and I so want everybody to, to go learn these exercises and get the book. And I would love to know just what's one thing we all could do in our life today before we have that could help us open up just a little bit to this energy.
I'll give you one funny one. So the study I was talking to my wife about from the Mayo Clinic last night is a study that looked at the effects of our tongue on our stress response. And it's really counterintuitive. I learned when I was doing yoga in my teenage years that you should have your tongue on the roof of your mouth. And the theory is in yoga that that connects the governing meridian and the central meridian and ties them together. So all good yogis are trained to have their tongue on the roof of their mouth. And in fact, most of the time, our tongue is on the roof of our mouth. Just naturally, our tongue is there. Except the Mayo Clinic found that that actually is a stress-inducing posture.
Wow.
And they did a randomized controlled trial, and they found that that is exactly the opposite of what you do to relax. Now, it's good if you are kind of low energy, lethargic. It's fine to put your tongue on the roof of your mouth. It will add energy to your body. But most of us have too much energy. We need to relax. We need to de-stress ourselves. And so for that, you need to put your tongue on the floor of your mouth. When you do that, so this is a little exercise I'm going to have you do right now. Think about something that annoyed you, triggered you, could be a lot, could be a little bit in the last 24 hours. Just a mild annoyance, could be a big annoyance, but in the last 24 hours, something that bothered you, and then give it a number from 0 to 10. So if someone was late giving you a project that was due in your workspace and they were late giving it to you, or somebody said something snarky to you, or there's a comment on Facebook that bothered you, or something in the last 24 hours that triggered you emotionally, and then give it a number from 0 to 10. Marci, let me just get yours. Don't tell me what it was. Just what was
10 is 10 is high.
10 is high. 0
okay.
is
0 is I got a 5.
5. Okay.
Yeah, it was something I have to edit that just needed way more time in editing, and I'm still not done. Yeah.
Good example. Okay, so everyone here, get yours and give it a number. Has to be a recent thing. And now you have your number. And now just relax your tongue. Let it rest on the floor of your mouth. Marci's closing her eyes, so you can close your eyes too if you want. And think of that thing again, but keep your tongue relaxed. And now, Marci, try and make it more than a 5. Or if it went up when you closed your eyes, which you may have done, try and raise it more while keeping your tongue relaxed.
Can't do it.
Can't do it. And you can't do it because that nerve in your tongue ties into your vagal nerve and relaxes your whole body. When you relax your tongue, your entire body, it sends a mechanical signal throughout your body to relax. And you might find that if eyes open, you think about this thing with tongue relaxed even now. So Marci, keep your tongue relaxed, eyes open, and think about this thing that took a long time to edit yesterday, the tongue relaxed, and what's your number?
2.
2. So that's more than 50% reduction in stress and triggering by the 1 second activity of relaxing your tongue. I mean, that's the beauty of science. We can now do the opposite of what my yoga teachers told me 50 years
Wow.
ago. And it's just that, so you add these scientific things together, there are lots of them. We filter them through this lens of what works in studies. And then we give you a package of things to do. It radically shifts your brain. In a study I did, a randomized controlled trial looking at brain function and volume, we found that in 30 days of doing eco-meditation, we found anatomical, structural, and functional changes in the brain, with the suffering part of the brain going quiet and the compassion part of the brain becoming highly active. In 30 days, the brains of people began to change. So you want to do these practices and your brain will change very, very quickly. It does not take 10,000 hours. There's a lot more in spiritual intelligence, but that is an introductory practice that will start to change your brain in a positive way.
Thank you for that. Thank you for letting me press you on that because I like experience and I could really feel that. And that was, I love the experiential. And this is what makes the science inspires me. I go, okay, I believe it because the science is cool. But the actual doing of it is to me where the rubber meets the road. And I love that you've included both of these so prominently, along with the stories that are so inspiring. The last thing I want to ask you, Dawson, is about these times and spiritual intelligence during these challenging times. It's very stressful around the world. And many people would say, you're just kind of checking out and going into your own bliss. And there's this whole world here. And so talk about the relationship between spiritual intelligence and what's going on and dealing with the challenge of the world.
That's a great point. And the ideal in medieval monasticism of East or West, so think about St. John of the Cross and think about St. Teresa of Avila, think about St. Francis of Assisi, think about all of these medieval mystics. And many of them were cloistered. They were behind the walls of a monastery and they were having blissful experiences, experiences of ecstasy, Rumi, and these Hafiz, the Sufi poets. And so that was the ideal, to move into these ecstatic realms. And they did that. But what I emphasize in spiritual intelligence is that today's world and today's times require us to come back out of those kinds of experiences and into the world and be activists. So when people were really outraged by the VA's rejection of energy therapies 20 years ago, I was equally outraged that they were banning EFT and banning EMDR and not bringing these things to veterans who were suffering in the Veterans Administration. A lot of my colleagues got mad. They tried to get the VA to listen. The VA didn't listen. The head of the VA actually wrote a personal letter just condemning these therapies. And so I got equally mad, but I started the Veteran Stress Solution and began to offer it to veterans independent of the VA. So you want to become an activist as well. And that's what the world needs now in terms of climate change, in terms of income inequality, racial inequality, gender inequality, all of the ills of our world. You emerge from that meditative state and you then translate that into effective action, social action in the outside world. And the world is shifting in positive directions in so many ways. So in chapters 6 and 7, I show how human brains become more compassionate, and the circuits of people who are meditating, who are becoming compassionate, to get bigger. They have bigger compassion centers in their brain, and that center that is responsible for compassion also mediates optimism, joy, altruism, awe. All of these positive emotions are all handled by that brain region. It's getting bigger in these people, so they want to help and do things. They wind up becoming activists in various ways. So we wind up doing things in the world, and we can find that increase in compassion happening in our society in all kinds of ways, despite the headlines. Focus on that. That's the way the world is trending.
Thank you so much for that perspective and for everything that you've shared here with us about spiritual intelligence. I know people are going to want to get the book, so you can go to spiritualintelligencebook.com. And also Dawson is offering a complimentary EFT mini manual and a bonus immunity eco meditation at dawsongift.com. We'll put that in the show notes. And Dawson, as always, time with you, I just feel expanded, excited, and like, more and more bliss. So any last minute words before we say goodbye to everybody?
There's just one other request. So please do pick up a copy at spiritualintelligencebook.com. Share that link on social media, share it with your friends, share it with your email list, share it with the people you know. And also, when you read the book, I would really appreciate a 5-star review, because those 5-star reviews make an enormous difference to other people hearing that the book is good. So please do share the book and review the book as well. And the final thoughts are, you are meant to live in that miracle zone. That is the wiring in your brain. As you release your stress, you go there naturally. You have these circuits, and the tragedy of your life will be if you die without ever turning them on. So I want you to live in bliss every day. You have wiring in your brain to do that. Please meditate daily. Use these practices in the book. You will find your life changing within a few weeks, more than you could have imagined. We're meant to live in the miracle zone. We were meant to live in bliss and love. You have all the wiring inside your head already to do just that. Please turn it on.
I love that, Dawson. And I'm going to end with a quote by you that says just exactly what you said. And that is, consistent practice over time can turn you into a completely different person. And so thank you so much for being here with us. It's just always delightful and enlightening to get to be with you, awakening.
Oh, every blessing.
And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. You know, if you were drawn to this conversation, I don't think it was by accident. Something in you is ready to live more fully in the miracle zone. And I hope that you are feeling uplifted and inspired and more aligned with the energy of miracles. And of course, if this episode touched your heart, please share it with someone you love. And please download your free gift from us, which is our ebook, Manifest a Life of Miracles, 4 Steps to Living in the Miracle Zone. You can get that at themiraclezonebook.com. And please remember, miracles are not reserved for just the lucky few. They are meant for you, for all of us. So I'm sending you so much love. Until next time.